Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I am the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and host to these TechTonic Conversations, a series of live webcasts that I've been putting on to bring you interesting conversations, timely, relevant, useful, and usable, on all things tech leadership and enterprise tech technology and topics around that. And today I am absolutely thrilled to be welcoming all the way from Perth, Australia, James Healy. James, thank you very much for your time and good evening in your case.
Dalibor, good evening, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a huge pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, James. James is the founder of the Behavior Boutique, and it's a consultancy that is focusing on, the marriage between behavioral science and organizational change. So this is absolutely right on. Like in my experience, I've lived this intersection of this Venn diagram for the last 30 years. Would love to hear your informed perspectives and stories about this, James. Now, for my audiences, as you know, this is a live conversation today, Monday, this April 14th. But the session is also being recorded and will soon be posted on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please consider liking and subscribing to a Tectonic Conversation channel. That certainly helps me spread the word, but you also will get notified every time I post new content. Now, if you'd like to engage in our conversation today, please submit questions using the Q&A function of this screen, and we'll just get going. So, James, uh, I typically do not introduce my guests. It's much more interesting to hear their stories told by themselves. So, if you don't mind, James, can you please just let us know who you are, what you're focusing on, how you navigated your life and career to now be leading the behavioral boutique?
Thank you, Dalibor. So, all the big questions. As you said, I'm the founder and managing director of the Behaviour Boutique. I live and work in Perth in Western Australia. Some of the viewers and listeners may have picked up from my accent already that I don't originally hail from here.
Yep.
I was born in the UK. I've lived all over the world. I've studied and worked in London. I spent a long period of my early life in the US, mostly in the Florida Keys.
Mhm.
I've lived in Singapore. I now live in Australia. I also spent two short stints studying languages in Colombia and Syria.
Wow. A true man of the world.
Who now lives in the most remote city on earth.
Yeah.
But it has some things going for it.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I think the way that I would describe my story and how I got to where I am now, I've always been fascinated by people. I've always been fascinated by humans. And I studied history, I studied philosophy, I studied economics. So I have two degrees from the London School of Economics and Political Science. And one of the crucial parts of my story actually happened there as a first year undergraduate.
Okay.
And I will say I particularly enjoyed my first year. I played a lot of soccer. I drank a lot of beer. I went to the occasional lecture. But this was okay because I figured I'm smart. I can make this work.
Yeah.
Particularly when it came to economics, because I had done economics in high school and I was good at economics. I understood how it worked. About two-thirds of the way through my first year, my economics tutor, who for reasons that are probably quite clear already from how I've described my work ethic at that point,
Yeah.
didn't much like me, took me on one side and he said, James, there's something I need you to know. Oh, yes, what's that? You're going to sail through first year economics. You're going to ace first year economics, but you're going to fail second and third year economics unless you stop thinking about what people do and start focusing on the graphs and the economics. Economics is a mathematical subject. It's not about what people do.
Ooh.
Now, at the time, I think this was intended as a damning indictment of me as an economist and a human generally, I think. And that's certainly the way that I took it. As time has gone on, I've come to see this much more as a damning indictment of economics and the orthodox assumptions that underpin economics and, frankly, through business schools have permeated management orthodoxy, have permeated the way that we run organizations.
Oh, yes.
I heeded his advice, not least because I actually failed first year maths, um, and did a philosophy degree. And
Mm.
all of the interesting topics in philosophy, as far as was concerned, actually all looking back intersect with psychology, with neuroscience, with anthropology.
Yep.
And what's personal identity? Do we have free will?
Mhm. Yep.
These kinds of questions have always fascinated me. Towards the end of my philosophy degree, I did a course called Scientific Revolutions,
Hmm.
and we studied those great turning points in the history of science where some revolutionary upended the status quo.
Yeah.
It's Kepler, it's Galileo, it's Newton, it's Copernicus, it's Darwin. And right at the end, there's a paper we have to read by two Israeli psychologists that none of us had heard of, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
Hmm.
We will return to them a little bit later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
As someone who's fascinated by humans, I did perhaps the most logical thing you could do other than be an anthropologist. I went and worked in a large investment bank. And if you're interested in humans, sitting on the trading floor of a large investment bank it's like going to the Serengeti if you're interested in animals.
I can imagine, man. Wow.
So I spent 15 years in various roles in big banks in London and Singapore, sitting on the trading floor, not trading. I was in started in operational roles and then very quickly ended up doing projects, change, implementing new technology,
Hmm.
responding to regulatory change after the financial crisis,
Yep.
2008,
Yep.
and trying to change culture. And I learned a lot. And like all the best lessons in life, I think I learned far more from the failures than the successes. I spent a couple of years wandering around the trading floors of Credit Suisse, trying to get people who were paid millions of dollars to do something to stop doing that thing because it said so in a policy that I had written. And you don't have to be an expert in human behavior to be able to work out how well
Oh, well, that
how
goes.
well that went.
Yep. Yep.
So I had always been interested in behavioral science. I'd always retained this interest. I'd always been reading around the subject. And throughout those roles, I had started to employ little techniques that I knew were behavioral science. I didn't necessarily call them that. I didn't necessarily tell anyone that that's what we're doing. But things like gamification, things like trying to create social norms, those kinds of techniques, and had a level of success with them. In one of the banks I was in, Standard Chartered, I'm not gonna hide because it's in my LinkedIn profile, so you'll be able to work it out. But I was running a large project that covered every country that Standard Chartered is in, so 53, 54 countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And without going into the details of what we're doing, we had to get a bunch of people, a few thousand people globally, to do something really tedious that they didn't want to do. And we tried various approaches, and eventually we decided to gamify it. And every week, every Thursday, I would send an email to the 53 country CEOs with a league table
Hmm.
showing the data of where each country was.
Yeah.
You know where this is going. And within minutes, these country CEOs, some of whom are running enormous businesses, $100 billion business, balance sheets, have forwarded my email on with me in CC to their exec leadership team, saying things like, "Why are we behind Pakistan? I
Yeah.
demand," you can guess which country that was. "I demand that we overtake
Yeah.
Pakistan."
Uh, yeah.
League tables, gamification, competition. Even people who tell you they're not competitive, they tend to be quite competitive.
Yep.
Continuing with my journey, I moved to
Uh,
Australia for family reasons 7 years ago. I joined Deloitte in the organization transformation practice. I decided to try and push behavioral science, and through an enormous amount of luck and fortuitous timing, I and also borderline harassment, I essentially just begged, demanded, cajoled various leaders in Australia to let me do this until eventually they were like, fine, just shut up, just leave us alone,
I was
just
waiting for you
you
to
do
say
this.
gamified. Um,
And about a month later, completely fortuitously, it
yep.
became a global priority for the firm.
Wow.
And I ended up being tasked with a whole team of people, but I ended up being tasked with coming up with a methodology to apply behavioral science in organizational change and culture and rolling that out across the globe, which I did. And I then spent the next 6 years working with clients across
Wow.
sectors on a whole range of problems, implementing new technology, changing culture, trying to apply techniques from behavioral science to understand human behavior and then to try and change it. And that brings me to today, where I'm doing pretty much the same thing, but outside of Deloitte, I'm doing it under the banner of the Behavior Boutique.
The Behavior Boutique. And this is fantastic story, James. So congratulations. What a career. What a life. What a career. Congratulations. Um, and of course, what a place to be in, right? I love Perth. I had a chance to visit it. It's just glorious and fantastic. And you're right, it's a gem. It's far, but it's a gem. Um, we call this conversation misbehaving. Why behavior trumps technology every time? So it's an interesting title, misbehaving, right? Um, I'd love for you to just maybe peel that onion a little bit further, maybe propose a point of view, or why did you actually suggest that we call it misbehaving? This was your title.
So
Hmm.
I won't lie, the name Misbehaving is partly just a little bit of clickbait to entice some interest, which hopefully has succeeded. But the serious point here is that so much of what we do in organizations is ultimately about changing people's behavior. An organization is a collection of individuals, it's a collection of humans. And that collection of humans is trying to influence other humans, their clients, their suppliers, their regulators, but they're trying to influence each other. And if you think about the ways that we do that in organizations, we write policies and procedures, we implement systems, we have organizational structures. There
Yeah.
are a whole host of things that we do in organizations that are implicitly, usually implicitly, sometimes explicitly, although rarely, intended to influence people, to change their behavior. And yet,
To
we don't
change,
often,
but also to organize and to structure those behaviors, right?
correct,
To
correct,
fence them, to point them, to
to coordinate them.
go, yeah,
But how often do we actually use the word behavior in an organizational context outside of the context of somebody did something they shouldn't have done?
Yeah. Behavior as in is a corrective thing, right?
Yeah, we talk
Cor-
about misbehaving.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Somebody said something they shouldn't have said, somebody did something they shouldn't have
Yeah,
done, somebody breached this policy. But we don't often talk explicitly about behavior, and we don't often make behavior the explicit objective of what we're trying to do, when so often it is the explicit objective of what we're trying to do. And we have whole departments, whole teams in organizations. We have the compliance department. We have the human resources department. We have cybersecurity teams. And there is a huge technical technology element of cybersecurity, but I'm sure that most of the viewers are aware that the vast majority of cybersecurity breaches, for example, are caused by human error. They are caused
correct.
by the person sharing the password. They're caused by the person clicking on the link. They're
Yeah,
caused by the person falling for the phishing or the spear phishing
yeah,
email.
yeah.
And we'll continue using cyber as an example for a moment. Most of the default approaches to influence behavior in this context consist of training and communications.
Yeah.
We default to telling people what to do, why to do it, how to do it.
Yeah.
We assume that if we give people information, they will understand that information the way that we want them to. They will remember that information, and then they will action that information.
And do it willingly, without supervision or their own accord, and that they will be perhaps even able to self-correct and continue to like left on their own accord, kind of, right?
So the way that I usually get people to think about this, and the viewers should thank their lucky stars that this is a webinar, so I'm going to have to do this rhetorically rather than embarrassing them. Think of a New Year's resolution that you've made. Think of a personal fitness, well-being, health behavior that
Yeah.
you've tried to change. You want to drink less, you want to go to the gym more, you want to eat healthier, you want to get more sleep. Would it help if I gave you some information about the benefits of doing that? Does anybody listening to this not know of the
Yeah.
benefits of
Yeah.
going to the gym, losing weight, not drinking? Everybody knows. Everybody knows these things. So why haven't we all done it? Why do we why do we not all have the
Exactly.
body of a Hollywood star?
Exactly. Because we are fundamentally irrational creatures, aren't we?
I don't know whether we're irrational, but we're not
Uh,
rational.
we are not rational. But
And
that's the beauty of economics, actually, right?
well, and this is why I always start that story with the economics is not about what people do, it's about the graphs and the equations. And there are all of these assumptions about human nature that are baked into economics, that we all have perfect information, that we
Exactly.
understand the information, that we always act in our best interest, that we
Right.
calculate
Yes.
the pros and cons, the costs and benefits of every decision and every behavior. This is this is nonsense.
It's
And
true. That's
everybody
right.
knows it's nonsense. If I say this out loud, people will be sitting there like,
That's not how it works.
that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We make decisions out of intuition, empathy, guilt, hopes, right? We decide uh, impulsively often. Certainly not at all how I think economists that you describe believed we do, right? I think the fundamental basis of that version of economy was that we are all rational and that we always take the rational step
Yep.
and make rational decisions.
And the reality is the majority of decisions happen so quickly that we are not consciously aware of them.
Mm.
There are obviously some decisions where that's not the case. There are, big, everyone here will be able to think of examples of this where you've lain awake at night wondering what to do. Should I change jobs?
Yeah.
Should I get married? Whatever it is, should I move
Yeah.
house?
Yeah.
There are those big decisions
Yeah.
where we agonize and we're very consciously aware of them. The vast majority of decisions, we are not consciously aware of them. And if we are asked afterwards why we did something, we come up with a plausible sounding explanation to justify it to ourselves and to others.
Oh God, I
And
love
as we and as we grow up, we get a lot better at that.
it. It's awesome.
And those automatic decisions, and this is where I come back to Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky and exactly why I've gone from reading Newton and Darwin to suddenly two Israeli psychologists. They were pioneers in this field that became known as behavioral economics, which is
Yeah.
essentially psychologists doing economics.
Yeah.
And one of the great insights there is that many of our decisions are taken, many of our behaviors arise through rules of thumb, heuristics. It's quite difficult to work out in a given situation what we should do. So rather than doing that, our brains answer an easier question. What's everyone else doing?
Mm.
What do I normally do in this situation?
Mm.
What's the easiest thing to do? What feels good?
Yep.
And
Yep.
this means that and don't get me wrong, that tendency has evolved over millions of years
Yeah.
because it's useful.
Yeah.
If you think back to ancestral humans living on the plains of Africa, and if you imagine two of those ancestral humans, one of whom we'll call him logical Lenny, and the other one we'll call impetuous Ian. There is a rustle in the bushes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Impetuous Ian goes, geez, there's a rustle, it could be a lion, I'm off, and
I'm
runs.
off. Yeah.
Logical Lenny, Logical Lenny thinks that one rustle is not a good basis for making a decision, and he would really like more data, and he would then like to carefully weigh up the probabilities using some various complex
Yeah.
statistical techniques that he's learned.
Yep.
Impetuous Ian is running for the hills when logical Lenny is breakfast.
It's breakfast. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yes, and soon enough we find ourselves at celebration of Lenny's life session, right?
exactly.
Oh my God,
Lenny is
yes.
out of the gene pool. Lenny is
Yep.
out of the gene pool. And logical Lenny's logical genes over thousands of generations tend to get bred out. So
Hmm.
I exaggerate slightly for effect, but these rules of thumb, these heuristics, they're not irrational. They have evolved because they're effective. We have retained them because they're effective. The problem is they evolved in a context which is very different from 21st century life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is a quote that I like from an anthropologist whose name I can't now remember, which is terrible. But the quote is this: the main problem of humanity is that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology.
Yes. Wow, that's a good one. Oh, wow. That's a very good one. I'm gonna write this
E.
down.
E.O. Wilson. E.O. Wilson was his
E.O.
name,
Wilson.
I've remembered.
All right, there you go.
And what the viewers might well be asking, what is this lunatic talking about logical Lenny getting eaten by a lion? What exactly is he doing with this? How is this relevant to organizations? Well, the way that this is relevant to organizations is, again, we tend to assume in an organizational context that if we tell people what to do, why to do it, how to do it, they will do it. The reality is that reliance on automatic thinking, the way that humans behave, is really profoundly influenced by our environment. And in an organizational context, environment means a whole host of things.
Yeah.
It's processes, policies, it's systems, and I don't just mean computer systems, I mean broader,
Yeah.
broader
Yeah.
systems.
Right.
It's the physical location. It's the KPIs, the metrics, the incentives. It's the remuneration structure. Again, I hark back to the banking example. I know
Yeah.
you're paid $2 million a year for doing this, but I'd really like it if you stopped doing it. Please.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's promotion, it's promotion criteria, it's job descriptions, it's org structures, it's this whole host of things. And Kahneman has this quote. He says, every organization, no matter what else it does, is a factory that manufactures judgments and decisions. And so I like to think of organizations as behavior factories. And if you're trying to change the behavior of people within the organization to use the new technology to be more innovative or more collaborative or more customer centric or whatever it is that you're trying to do, think of the organization as a factory and think about the levers within the organization that you can pull to make that behavior more likely. Because it's not enough to put a poster on the wall.
Yeah. This is a very good one. I love it. So the organizations are factories that manufacture judgment and decisions. You're right. This is actually very true. Or should I say, Professor Kahneman is right. It's
Correct.
very,
Professor
very
Kahneman,
powerful.
no, Nobel laureate in economics in 2002. He sadly passed away last year. Another Nobel laureate in economics, who I also like to refer to a lot, Richard Thaler. Now, I must confess at this point that the title of Richard Thaler's autobiography is Misbehaving. So I plagiarized that one as well.
There we go. There we
Um,
go.
Thaler is an interesting character because he was not a great economist. And when he took the decision to do a PhD in economics, his supervisor basically told him that nobody thought that was a good idea and he wasn't going to achieve very much as an
Yeah.
economist, which must have given him great satisfaction when he won his Nobel Prize in 2017. Um, but when Thaler is asked to sum up his life's work, Thaler says very simply, if you want people to do something, make it easy.
Make it easy.
And this is an insight which is both totally profoundly, I'll try not to swear, profoundly obvious, but also so insightful and so
Yeah, yeah,
groundbreaking that he
yeah.
won a Nobel Prize for
Yeah,
it.
it's incredible, right? Make it easy.
And I make it easy. And I would invite all of the viewers and listeners to think of the many, many examples that I'm sure they've encountered in their own organizations, in their own careers, when the organization has told them to do something, whether in a policy or in a shared values poster or just in a direct statement, and then seemingly conspired to make it as hard as possible to do that same thing. We want you to collaborate, which is why we have put you in different offices in different countries with different time zones.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We want you to do X, which is why we've set up the system to make it almost impossible for you to do X, and force you to do Y. We don't make it easy. We don't make it easy.
Yeah, you're right. This is profoundly obvious and insightful at the same time. And it actually doesn't have to be much more complicated than that at the end of the day. And yeah, so of course you are right. Of course you are right. This is true. And then when you think about that, actually, the whole organization is a it's essentially a factory that produces decisions, decisions not just which supplier to get, but perhaps decisions of where do I spend my next half an hour and how, right? You can see the importance of understanding what drives behavior so that you can actually influence. I almost I almost want to say like the change management is actually mislabeled. We're not managing change. We're actually it's behavior management. Is it? Is it not?
I agree. And I've always disliked the term change management. I it always makes it feel it almost feels implicit in that terminology and in lots of the other terminology that change is always negative, that people will
Yeah.
always dislike change. And this phrase, we must manage resistance, we must overcome resistance. Whenever I hear that, I imagine Darth Vader saying something about crushing the rebels. We will crush the resistance. And it's this idea that people are change averse, people are change resistant. The reality is humans are the most adaptable species the planet has ever known. Uh, we have a great example of this, Dalibor. Humans humans inhabit every
Yeah.
known habitat on Earth. You in the frozen wastes in
Yeah.
Canada, and me
Canada.
down
Yeah.
here in the arid desert of
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah.
Humans regularly, willingly go through change. Anytime someone is offered a new job, it's a huge change.
Yeah.
You don't hear people saying, I'm change fatigued. I don't want to take the new job. Or
Mm.
anytime people get married, anytime looking at the
Yeah.
picture on the front cover of the book over your left shoulder, people queue up outside the Apple store for 24 hours to get the new iPhone,
There we go. Yes.
Steve.
Absolutely.
I mean, humans are not change averse. Humans are loss averse. Humans are averse to change that will impact their identity, that will
Loss
take away
averse.
resources. Yeah, we're averse to loss.
Love it. Very, very good. Very good. Yes.
And so I tend to feel like so much of, and I'll get myself in trouble here, but so much of traditional approaches to change management in organizations, they don't really work. They come down to telling people again why this new system or this merger or this org restructure is going to be great and telling them what we want them to do. And they're not really designed for humans as we really are. They're designed for this caricature of humans, logical, rational, perfect information, etc., etc. And I would love my raison d'etre, my reason for being is to try and make organizations more human. Try and make organizations work for real humans as we really are in our messy, glorious
No, you
complexity.
I love what you're saying. There is a fallacy here that you are identifying, and it's the same fallacy that traditional economists had in stating that the economy is a accurate science because people are rational beings. You're taking that fallacy and saying, well, the same actually applies in organizational context. We have imagined a rational employee, a person who wears a tie, who has a suit, who is going to make the right decisions aligned to our vision and strategy because they are the ultimate utopian picture of a rational, perfect employee. It's not like that, right? Each one is a bubble of emotions, histories, behaviors. What about me's, right? That's very true.
And and it's that thing, if you think back through your career, when you first start work, and you're young and inexperienced and you don't really know anything, you look at people who are more senior than you, particularly people who are, two, three, four, five, six levels more senior than you, and
Yeah.
you particularly look at senior people in executive roles, and you imagine that they are these perfect beings. They
Yeah.
are these robots, these automatons. And then you get older and you get to know more of those people. And actually, just because of time, maybe you become one of them. They become your friends,
Yeah.
your spouse. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Guess what? They're just messy, imperfect, complex humans like the rest of us. They
Oh
have
my
bad
God,
days. They have blind spots.
how many times have I heard or said a version of, "Oh my God, this is high school all over again," or "This is elementary school all over," like same dynamics, right? Same
Because
dynamics.
they're human dynamics.
Human
They're human
dynamics. There
dynamics.
we go. Exactly. Bingo. I love it. Very good. This is very, very good. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for this like you should see I'm my desk is full of post-it notes, right? I've written down all of these golden nuggets on post-it notes everywhere. James, look, I know you have also. So first of all, thank you very much. This superbly explains and sets up this philosophy very, very well. Uh, you have recently published a book. The book that I also proudly have here, Adopting AI. It sits just here in between Jobs and Yuval Noah Harari, so on my on my shelf. Uh, what is the connection between behavioral sciences and artificial intelligence, James?
So firstly, thank you for putting me between those luminaries, and I think Elon Musk is also up there as well. So I feel
There he is.
complete,
There is Elon
yeah,
hiding behind a chair.
I feel complete imposter syndrome now. So that's good. Um, this is a question I've been asked a lot. Why is the behavioral science guy co-authoring a book on AI? I've always been fascinated by AI, and I've always been fascinated by AI because of the parallels, believe it or not, with behavioral science.
Okay.
If if you go back through the history of AI, there has always been a big crossover between the two disciplines. So if you go back to the Dartmouth conference in 1956, which originally coined the term artificial intelligence, it really set the field up. One of the prime movers of that was Herbert Simon. Well, Herbert Simon was many things, but he was primarily a decision scientist. He's arguably the first major behavioral economist. He won the Nobel Prize in economics. And he's by no means the only one. I'll avoid rattling off a litany of long dead academics because no one's that interested in that. But the AI project was always about matching and ultimately exceeding human intelligence.
Yeah.
And there were two main tracks of AI research you know, from the early days onwards, from 1956 onwards. There was the symbolist track, and the symbolist track has given us almost all of the computer technology that we're all used to. The symbolist track assumed that intelligence worked by manipulating symbols, by using symbolic logic to represent reality and then perform mathematical operations on it. So everyone will be familiar with Boolean logic, it's named after George Boole, Irish logician and mathematician. That symbolist track assumes that decision making and intelligence are rational and logical,
Yeah. If
much
then,
like
right? If then,
if then else, right?
else or, right?
And and even those of us who've never written a line of code in our lives have learned that computer systems work logically.
Yeah.
If I do the same inputs,
You
I
get
will
the
get the
same
same
answer.
outputs.
Yeah.
And we have all had the experience of screaming in frustration when that doesn't work because the input
Yeah.
that we think we're supposed to
Yep.
give does not give the output that we want.
Yeah.
And it could be something as simple as a toaster. It could be writing some very complex software.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. The parallel track, the connectionist track, was explicitly based on replicating in a very simplified way the workings of the brain.
Mm.
And artificial neural networks, as the name suggests, are a virtual replica of the brain. They work by strengthening connections between neurons. That is exactly how the human brain works, as far as we know.
Yeah.
And as I'm sure many of the viewers are aware, for a long time the connectionist track was a bit of a joke. All of the funding and all the attention and all of the progress happened in the symbolist track until it didn't. And you then had this something of a pivot to the connectionist track. One of the founding fathers of that, everyone will be familiar with the name Jeff Hinton.
Yep.
If you read anything Hinton's written or listen to him interviewed on podcasts, he will tell you his undergrad degree was in psychology. His aim was to understand the human brain.
Yeah.
His psychology degree didn't do that for him. So if you're as smart as Hinton, the only logical thing to do then is to start building artificial brains. And by his own admission, he laughs when he says this. His aim was to win a Nobel Prize in physiology or
Mm.
medicine for
Yeah.
understanding the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
He failed. He failed. He got the Nobel Prize in physics
In
instead,
physics, exactly.
for
Yep.
accidentally developing, backpropagation algorithm that enabled all of these breakthroughs. So I have this very deep intellectual kind of academic interest in the way that AI has strangely mirrored behavioral science. Those twin tracks are very much like the economist's caricature of a human, the messy reality of a human. And once you understand this, the way that particularly generative AI behaves starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why
It's
two
um
same prompts will result in different answer every single time, right?
it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
It's emergent. I am
Yeah.
not saying it is exactly like a brain. I'm not saying it behaves like a human, and I'm certainly not saying it's conscious. I'm not even necessarily saying it's intelligent, whatever that whatever that term actually means.
Yeah.
But I think it is best understood as an intelligence. And
Mhm.
at the heart of the book, Adopting AI, is this contention that if we treat AI as just another technology, treat it as just another system, we will really struggle to successfully adopt it. We need to think of it more as an intelligence. And the catchphrase I use for this is AI is your strangest, smartest, dumbest coworker.
Yeah. Your
And
polymath
if
sidekick.
it's it's the polymath that can't spell.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
it's the genius physicist that you wouldn't want cooking your pizza because it might put bleach on it or broken glass, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
And if you start to think of it in these terms,
Brilliant.
the flaws are much easier to deal with. And obviously, a trillion words have been written about AI, particularly in the last 2 years. But so much of what I had seen and what Paul, my co-author, had seen written on this topic of adopting AI simply didn't consider the fundamental nature of AI. It was like people had done a control F on whichever enterprise technology you choose, Salesforce, SAP, and just replaced Salesforce and SAP with AI.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
It's totally different.
It's not like it's more like a merger, right? It's more like a merger than replacement of technology, isn't it? You now
Yeah,
have a
you're bringing
different
in.
culture, with different
Yeah,
intelligence, with different qualities, with different way of thinking, merging with your wetware culture. And now what comes out? Well, now what? Right?
yeah. And we don't do it like that around here. No, that's not the answer that we'd give. No,
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
this is weird. And so that is at the heart of the book. And we set out to write the book. I think Paul was probably more techno-optimist than I was going in. I'm certainly not full-on doomer, and he's certainly not full-on tech utopian. And I think we had an interesting effect on each other. I think we both pulled each other back towards the center.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I would, and I don't want to speak for Paul. I know you've recently interviewed Paul as well. I think we're both very much on the fence. The book starts. The book starts with the utopian vision, and if you are at all AI skeptical, and I think you should be, if you read the first chapter, you will probably want to vomit a number of times. And
I'm a techno optimist. I loved it. It was inspiration, wasn't it? But for those on the other side of that spectrum, I can see. Yes, yes, right. Okay, yeah,
but we deliberately started there because it's only because of the immense promise. It's only because of just how truly amazing the utopian version would be in terms of the breakthroughs in science, in terms
yeah.
of, the breakthroughs in sustainability, the environment, etc., etc., etc. It's only with those that this is worth doing because once you start to get into the risks and the ethical challenges, if we haven't laid out the utopian case at the beginning, people are going to start asking, well,
Why are
what's the
we
point
doing
of
it?
this thing?
What's the point?
Yeah,
Exactly. The risk
like,
far outweigh the yeah. So the upside
and
has to be spectacular there. Right?
right. And
Yeah,
I think that is, again, the ethics, the back third of the book. So the book's three sections. It's essentially, what is AI? What's the
yeah,
potential? What's the next frontier? How
yeah,
did we get here?
yeah.
That's the first section. The second section, excuse me, is all about adoption. So it's strategy, it's adoption, change management. We dislike that term. We prefer adoption and
Yeah.
workforce implications. And then the final section is all about ethics and governance. And we, Paul and I, both believe that the ethical challenges here are one of the key reasons why this is different to any previous technology and why it needs to be implemented differently. Fundamentally, implementing SAP or some of the big enterprise tech is it's ethically neutral for an organization, right? There are pros and cons to spending
Yeah.
the money but it's very unlikely in and of itself to embroil you in really tricky ethical dilemmas.
Right.
It's
100%.
it doesn't have the same inherent challenges of bias, of opacity, the fact that no one really knows exactly what's going on in there. It doesn't have the sustainability challenges. We've all probably seen the posts about just how many gallons of water and how many kilowatts it takes to run a simple
Clear. Yeah.
prompt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have the looming copyright elephant in the room. It doesn't have all of these challenges. And so what we grapple with throughout the book is obviously as the technology improves, some of these challenges diminish. The hallucination problem, the inaccuracy problem has diminished.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's never going to totally go away,
Yeah.
at least not unless there is some change of technical direction. So how, to go back to this point, in a world where we have built our organizations on the flawed assumption that our humans are logical and rational and consistent, do we now introduce an incredibly powerful technology that is not logical and rational and consistent? And perhaps some of the viewers are having this experience at the moment. Try sitting down with a legal team or a compliance team and explaining that, well, on Tuesdays it
Yeah.
might say strawberry has two R's, and on Thursdays it might say strawberry has three, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Try writing a policy for that.
yeah. So in other words, what I'm taking out of this is that we should consider these systems more like introducing an intelligent entity, human-like, in terms of its it's not rational, it's not logical in a prescribed manner that will always follow the same path predetermined like all other technology systems have done in the past, all of them, right? You program it, it delivers. If it doesn't, you either didn't do it right, or sort of like it's pre-programmed. So really, this one is different because this technology actually is more like merging us, the emotional creatures, with other creatures who are weirdly closer to us in the way they quote unquote think and decide. So it's more like it's more like this is not a adoption. It's not the pure adoption. It's almost like a merger of cultures.
Exactly. And it then becomes a cultural challenge. It becomes a behavioral challenge.
Yes.
And, much has been written about how, again, given the emergent and unpredictable nature of this, it makes it very difficult to know what the use cases are. Again, I compare and contrast with SAP. You implement SAP for your finance team. Yeah, it's going to change the way that they do things. It's not really going to change what they do.
Yeah.
The use
Exactly.
cases are baked in. It's going to help
Yeah.
you post journals. It's going to help you,
Yeah. It's
prepare a trial
always about
balance.
efficiency, effectiveness. How do we kind of do what we do faster, better, cheaper? You know, that's traditional case, right?
And people may not like the new system that you've implemented, but it's unlikely that they're not going to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, they might not know how to do it, but they're not sitting there thinking, I wonder why we've got SAP. Like,
Exactly.
what do
Exactly.
I do with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, the workflow is different, the screens are different. You might not know how to do the thing that you want to do, but you know that you're still going to do the
Yeah.
thing that you
You
do.
still have your job, and this is still a tool to get you to do your job now differently.
Correct. Correct. That's the key word. It's a tool. You give people in an organizational context access to a generative AI tool. Just give them ChatGPT or something. They could do anything with it. So you've got one end of the spectrum. There's a whole bunch of risks that, well, actually now the finance department are going to start doing marketing stuff, or the marketing department are going to do finance stuff, and I genuinely don't know which of those is more terrifying. Um, but you also have, I think that, certainly from what I've seen, the more realistic risk, which is people are going to go, oh my God, I don't know what to do with this. And I've got a deadline and I've got back-to-back meetings and I'm not going to do anything with it. And, you're now paying a lot of money for Microsoft Copilot, for example,
Mhm.
and people aren't using it and you're not seeing the adoption. And so the obvious thing to say here is it's about experimentation. You've got to create the space for people to experiment, which again is something that we've said for a long time in organizations. Every organization now pays lip service to this. Well, we fail fast. We have a culture of test and learn. I would respectfully submit that unless you are in a pure tech company
Yeah.
below a certain size, that's probably not true.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And the reason that's not true is people are afraid to fail. Because failure tends to have negative consequences,
Oh yeah.
particularly if you're in a highly regulated industry or you're in a
Oh,
capital intensive industry or an industry where, health and safety is a real problem. But with AI, you also have the opposite problem, which is people are afraid to succeed. because you have to feel really, really comfortable about your relationship with your boss and your standing in the company to say, hey, Dalibor, I've been playing with this new AI thing, and guess what? I've automated 60% of my job. Am I getting a pay rise or a medal, or am I looking at promotion?
Yeah.
Or
Oh, yeah. Or
is that
or
a
a
cardboard
goodbye.
box? Why is there a cardboard box on my desk?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Wow. What a set of questions to struggle through, eh?
Again, it's not worth it unless the payoff is huge. And I think the payoff is potentially huge, but the risks are there.
Yeah.
I think as someone who spends his time thinking about humans, my biggest concern with AI is not, it's not the Nick Bostrom existential risk that it turns us all into paper clips. It's not even the sustainability risks or the bias or whatever. Those things are all real. My biggest fear is that we just use it for the wrong things.
Mm.
And we use it to do things more efficiently that we just need to stop doing. We use it to create yet more pointless content. If I have met my AI chatbot write an email, which I send to you, which you then have your AI chatbot summarize into some bullet points, and maybe draft a reply to me, which I then have my AI chatbot summarize. Have we communicated with each other?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the point of any of it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Human nature.
This is fascinating. We are. I think everybody would. Well, I certainly people I chat with agree that we are in the most momentous moment in history, perhaps of all of our species' history. That this is the moment where we get introduced to another alien form of intelligence, and we need to figure out how do we deal with this. Like I've heard, I don't know whom to credit this, but the artificial intelligence actually rebranded as alien intelligence. It is intelligence that is foreign to us. It's not artificial. It's different. It's real, not artificial, but different. It's alien to us. How do we
So,
square that, right?
so I totally agree with that. The way I think about that and sort of the challenge that I will leave for listeners and viewers here is think about the octopus or the cuttlefish. Now, if you don't know much about these species, I suggest doing a bit of research. They are so unlike us. They diverged from us in the evolutionary tree something like 600 million years ago. Our last common ancestor with cephalopods, octopus and cuttlefish was, a microscopic worm that lived in the ocean.
Yeah.
They separately evolved intelligence.
Mhm. Yeah.
The octopus brain is not like the human brain. It has roughly the same number of neurons as a dog. So that gives you an idea of, in it, usually in a
Intelligence.
much
Yeah.
smaller body.
Yeah.
But its brain is distributed through the body.
Yeah.
So something like 25% of the neurons are in the skin and in the arms. If you cut off an octopus arm, which I'm not recommending you do, but if you do, that octopus arm behaves independently.
Incredible.
That's the kind of alien intelligence
This.
completely different from ours that we need to start thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating, man. James, this has been a fascinatingly educational and intriguing conversation. Thank you very much. We are approaching time. We have 1 minute from time. I want to be respectful of it. What would be your advice? Like, what would be your call for action here?
Think about think about your organization, think about your role, whatever it is, as influencing other humans. and think about those humans as they really are, as social, emotional, tribal, storytelling animals. And think about how you can make it easy for them to do whatever it is that you want them to do.
That's a beautiful summary, eloquently stated. James, thank you very much. This was fantastic. And for the audience members, very soon, later on today, will be available on YouTube. Thank you very much and have yourselves a wonderful and lovely Monday. And James, good night to you. All the best.
Thank you, Dalibor. Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.